Hi there, I'm Emily Muehlstein with the Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council, and this is a public hearing video designed to gather your comments on a generic amendment that considers allowing us to carry over uncaught annual catch limit. We'll start with a Little Fisheries 101 background. So the overfishing limit, which is this value in red, is the level of harvest that is associated with the overfishing threshold. Meaning, if we harvest more than the overfishing limit, then the stock is considered overfished. The acceptable biological catch, which is the level here in yellow, is set by the Council's scientific advisors, the Scientific and Statistical Committee. Now that can be set equal to the overfishing limit or below based on any need to account for scientific uncertainty. And then the annual catch limit, which is seen here in green, is the level of harvest that is set by the Council. Now that can be set equal to the acceptable biological catch or below, depending on if we want to account for management uncertainty. So in 2016, revisions to National Standard 1 of the Magnuson-Stevens Act included guidelines for carrying over unused quota from one year to the next. The Council is considering doing this for its reef fish and coastal migratory pelagic fisheries management plans. And we'll also have to consider making modifications to our framework procedures so that National Marine Fisheries Service can quickly adjust catch levels to allow for carryover. This table simply provides us with a summary of our annual catch limits and our harvest from 2017, so you can see an example of some stocks that have had unharvested quota. So we'll jump right into our management actions. Our first action considers the eligibility for carryover. For carryover to occur, controls would need to be applied to constrain harvest and prevent overfishing. It's important to note that the unused portion of the annual catch limit would apply to the smallest managed portion of the fishery, meaning the fishing sector or possibly the subcomponent. If combined landings exceed the sector annual catch limit or the stock annual catch limit, then there would not be carryover. When carryover is allowed, the sum of the carryover from the year and the acceptable biological catch could not exceed the overfishing limit. Then carryover would only be an underage from the original annual catch limit, not an adjusted annual catch limit. The first alternative here is the no action alternative. The second alternative, which is currently the Council's preferred, would allow for a carryover provision for reef fish and coastal migratory pelagic stocks. Carryover provisions would apply to stocks and stock complexes with sector allocations. The portion of allocation for species managed under the individual fishing quota program would not be eligible for carryover provisions. And then we have some sub-options here to figure out what other factors might exclude a species from being eligible for carryover provisions. Option 2A would exclude a species if it's under a rebuilding plan. Option 2B, which is currently a preferred option, would exclude a species if it is considered to be overfished. Option 2C, which is also a Council preferred alternative, would exclude a species that was not subject to a quota closure because the annual catch limit was projected to be met. Option 2D would exclude a species if the catch levels had not been projected from a stock assessment. And finally, option 2E would exclude a species if it was managed by apportionment with another fisheries management council. And this table simply shows you which species would be included or excluded based on the options picked in this action. Moving to action 2, which considers adjusting the carryover based on management uncertainty. So currently, the buffer between the acceptable biological catch and the overfishing limit is determined by the Council's control rule. Most of the stocks that are under consideration here are managed by the Council without accounting for management uncertainty, meaning the annual catch limit is set equal to the acceptable biological catch. Now in this case, that means it's possible that carryover would result in the annual catch limit being equal to the acceptable biological catch, which is also equal to the overfishing limit. According to the National Standard 1 guidelines, this might not sufficiently prevent overfishing. So the council is considering limiting how much the buffer between that acceptable biological catch and overfishing limit can be reduced to adjust the amount of annual catch limit that can be carried over. So our first alternative is the no action alternative. The second alternative, which is the council's current preferred alternative, would adjust the amount of the annual catch limit to be carried over into the following fishing year by limiting how much the difference between the acceptable biological catch and the overfishing limit can be reduced. In option 2A, the difference could be reduced by 25%. In option 2B, which is currently the council's preferred alternative, the difference could be reduced by 50%. And then in option 2C, the difference between the ABC and the OFL could be reduced by 75%. And finally, action 3 considers modifying the framework procedures. So a framework procedure basically provides a standardized mechanism for implementing changes to a fishery management plan. There are two types of framework procedures. Open frameworks are used when there is some sort of discretion that can be used while selecting various management alternatives. Closed framework procedures are used in more prescriptive circumstances, when A would trigger B to happen. The council is considering modifying the reef fish and coastal migratory pelagic frameworks to allow carryover to occur in a more abbreviated management process. Our first alternative is the no action alternative. The second alternative, which is a council's preferred alternative, would modify the closed framework procedure to allow the regional administrator of NOAA fisheries to modify the ABC, the ACL, the ACT, and the quotas to allow for carryover. The third alternative, which is a council preferred, would modify the abbreviated framework procedure for the reef fish, coastal migratory pelagic, coral, and spiny lobster fishery management plans to allow specification of an acceptable biological catch recommended by the SSC based on results of a new stock assessment and using the ABC control rule. The fourth alternative, which is also a council preferred alternative, would revise the framework procedure for the reef fish, CMP, coral, and spiny lobster FMPs to have consistent terminology and format, and to include changes that standardize the framework procedure for the coral and coral reef and spiny lobster FMPs regarding accountability measures. So we'd like to hear your thoughts on this amendment before taking final action. You can send us your comments either by following this link and filling out our online comment form, or you can simply email us at golfcouncil@golfcouncil.org. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and send us your thoughts.